Morning, Council. My name is Lee Walker and I'm assisted by Gerard Doreen, and Gerard will speak first.
Hello everyone, greetings. We are speaking on behalf of, well, obviously speaking to our submission and we'll try not to repeat what's written down. Speaking on behalf of 8 schools, about 2,500 children in that Linwood, Woolston area who are directly enrolled in those schools. Obviously there's a lot of other children involved in early childhood centres and at home. So a significant number of kids in our city, citizens of our city. The first thing that I wanted to acknowledge is the Council's commitment to maintaining the funding into community groups, and we're pleased about that, we applaud that. We would love you to consider increasing your resourcing of community groups who work with families and children in our part of town in particular. We'd also like you to have the presence of children in your thinking and in your decision making. I look at the piles of paper on your desks and I know you've had days of hearings and I know you've got multiple demands and I know your heads will be cluttered because you're just like the rest of us with 2 arms and 2 legs, but kids need to be in your thinking, please, as much as you can put them, and in some discrete, clear areas where you believe a difference can be made. And you know, we work and we engage with and we experience kids every day, and one of the things that we would look for your role is the way that you can support those who work with kids outside of school. We're not asking you to come and bolster the curriculum or help us employ more teachers. It's about the way that you can support those agencies and groups who help children and families, particularly those who are less advantaged in our communities. Children have been, and I'm stating the bleeding obvious, but children have been adversely affected, negatively affected by what's occurred in Christchurch with the period of earthquakes and how we as a community are responding to that, how some of the adults in their life let them down, a whole lot of things. Without getting into blame, it's just a fact, you know, that the research from the University of Canterbury, Canterbury District Health Board stats, UNESCO research, other people's research tells us the impacts on children and the implications for that for us as a city and a community in our future as those children run the risk of not performing as well in their lives as we want them to, and that has impacts for them but also for us as a community and as a city. And one stat that often stands out is that 40% increase in the number of mental health referrals and the queues for kids getting into Whakatata House, which is 10 to 12 weeks for some of our kids who we're screaming out for support for. And the systems aren't coping. Child, Youth and Family and others aren't coping. So, yeah, the need is undeniable, and we're not asking you to address that, but we're looking at, okay, what are some achievable steps, some grassroots, feet on the ground stuff, helping to encourage kids to be actively involved in sport, culture, cultural activities, music, other sort of community engagement activities that, for whatever reasons, their families aren't able to do or aren't doing. And we have some great partnerships already in our communities in the Linwood Woolston area. There's groups such as Te Māpua Trust, the Woolston Development Project, Salvation Army, Youth Town, sports clubs. They do good stuff. It's not rocket science. It's encouraging kids' involvement, helping with transport, uniforms, being there at game time, coaching, mentoring role models. You can't beat this stuff. It's so important in children's life to have those positive adults, and they don't get it in other ways, and you guys can help their access to that through that ongoing funding of some of the community groups or others that you might know of that I don't know of that you can support. The last couple of things that I'd want to say is that some of the cost of the involvement of those groups and their support, both in school and out of school, has been hidden by the Red Cross funds that have gone into our schools. And we use that, and we've used it over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's coming to an end this year. We've employed counsellors through Presbyterian support. We've got Te Māpua Trust and Youth Town working in our school. Salvation Army does that without that funding, and they do some work in our schools and outside of the school. And the Red Cross funds have been, I think, both for central government and perhaps for you guys as well, taken away some of the burden of costs that we might otherwise have looked for. So I think knowing that that source of funding is coming to an end this year is important. So my last point is it's achievable stuff, it's doable, keep supporting those groups, it makes a difference. Not all the kids are the same, not all the families are the same in terms of need, but there's a big chunk of need there, and Lee can maybe comment a bit more on that.
So to lay the context for you, so you know the area we were talking about, it starts with Linwood North School, then moves down to Bromley School, Linwood Avenue School. Linwood College is part of the group, but not part of these figures. Then it moves down into Woolston School, Bamford School. So it's quite an arc that comes through. And the way that the data came about is very interesting, because we're all in a position of we don't know what we don't know. And so the schools were doing their thing, and the council is doing their thing. And so the council has got very, very good systems to set up for community groups applying to do sport and after-school activities. For a weird reason, we decided to survey the children to find out what the children were actually doing. And we were just blown out of the water that we assumed in New Zealand, the green fields, everybody's out there doing sport on a Saturday morning. It isn't happening. Whether the east side is unique, I honestly don't know. There might be other places that have surveyed it, I don't know. You can see those figures there. I can tell you from the survey that came back, and we're talking all the children in the Linwood area from ages about 7, 8, 9 and 10, 39 boys play league out of about 200 odd that we surveyed. 39 play soccer, 30 play rugby. And we've had serious conversations with the likes of Linfield Sport, what can be done? We don't have an answer to that. We haven't come today to say there is an answer now on the table. What we're coming is saying that the council needs to keep funding because, and then we have heard, through contacts with the council, is that the council is looking at these things and what it can be done. So the schools are sort of saying, look, please remember us, we'll be part of this conversation. But if you don't put the money there first, you're really going to miss out on an opportunity. And it's how all of these things go, that if things slowly get sort of cut off, we'll take 5% off this year and 5% off next year, it comes off. And then people are starting to have to prune off. So the organisations are having to go back and prune off people that go away. So we're sort of saying, look, please at least hold the status quo for your community funds that are going through there. I could tell you more figures about actual what after-school activities are happening. That they are fully subscribed by the children that can go there. Girls, I think it was about 20% of girls on a Saturday morning are involved in sport across the Linwood area. Nearly all of those girls play netball, attached through a couple of the clubs that are over there. We suspect that the more of them want to do it, and there's some very serious issues around cost. Okay, some very serious issues about costs for them. We've got, I hate to say it, I mentioned one organisation, Linfield Sport. We have a very strong association with Linfield Sport, quite skillful use of money, supported by Sports Canterbury, that's put together, that funds the sport in the schools. So in the school on a daily basis, 80 or 90% of the children are doing sport in school. It doesn't go across to the weekend. A number of organisations run after-school programs for these children. Again, they're fully subscribed by children, more money would help it. The last point that I would make is we discovered purely by accident that we were taking data out of the census. The mesh blocks of the census were guiding us. But most of those schools have had funding drops, so we went back and researched back at that. And when we found out that what's actually coming out in terms of the number of families with benefits, single mothers with benefits, in the schools is much higher than you see from the census. So these are the women that are living on about $300 a week, trying to put a child through school. They're not going to buy rugby boots and jackets and all that sort of stuff. And one school, nameless, reported 38% of the people coming into that school were solo mothers on a benefit. Census data would tell you it's 7 or 8%. But we're just here today to sort of say, thank you for the money that you're putting in already. Please keep on doing it. And if you can find it in your hearts to maintain what's there, great. And the doors are certainly open to the schools to come and have a chat. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tim, Phil?
Thank you for this. I can see my old school Tamariki in there, and we were a single parent family. So, and when I was at Tamariki, which was far too many years ago to worry about, there was absolutely no mention of sport at all, and there's no program at all in it. But Canterbury Rugby League came to my children's primary school, and they ran an absolutely outstanding program. I thought I went down there because it was both boys and girls, and I was a bit worried about my daughter kind of tackling. And they ran an extremely good tackle program, the whole thing, and then ran a primary school round robin type thing. So I'm just wondering,
that's still happening.
So
what I'm trying to paint, there's two pictures. What's actually happening in schools with the support of all of those clubs and that is great. 80 to 90% of children are doing sport in school. Transfer that to the weekend, and it just evaporates.
So and that's really my question: is what is the clubs coming into the primary schools? Do they come in? Do the primary schools have an on-site connection and to try and coach things?
We have some links with basketball, with rugby league, and sometimes you'll get one-off things from netball or soccer will come into a day sort of profile of the sport and do some games with kids. Rugby and rugby league are probably the ones that hang in there a bit longer. And they do try and foster, and they support the foster involvement, make connections with kids and families, foster things like, I think Linwood Rugby this year have done some work around subsidising uniforms and boots and so on. But the adults who need to make the decision to support that through the family aren't doing it.
Oh, thank you.
And that's where the community groups help out.
I'm afraid that's come to the end of our time, but the next submission is Sport Canterbury. You might like to stay. I always remember Judge Beecroft, former principal youth court judge, saying, kid in sport stays out of court. So I think there's a lot of sympathy for what you've said, but you might like to have a conversation with Sport Canterbury before you both leave. So thank you very much.
Thank you.